So, one of the things that I wanted to talk to you about is that your story has kind of inspired one of the pieces of the show, right? One of the stories that we are trying to tell. Could you talk a little bit about how that came to be, how you got associated with the project? How has that happened?
Oh, so I met Divya a long time ago when Saath was Bollywood dancing. My husband, me, and my kids came to a photo shoot, a family photo shoot, where we dressed up in traditional Indian clothes, and that is still to date the best picture of me and my husband that we have. Then I just kept following up with Bollywood dancing, went to all their shows, went through everything with Saath, and then I met Divya through mutual friends at different parties around the city. I am really involved in a lot of autism outreach. So for many years, I was the walk chair for Autism Speaks. I also helped with Autism Society of Minnesota. And my son is autistic. And then when I was 37, I also found out that I'm autistic as well. I post all about that a lot on social media. I've been on different podcasts in our community with Asha USA and with Sewa AIFW on their podcast, talking about stigma with autism in the community and how we as a community can come together and recognize that, yes, we have people with invisible and visible disabilities, but that doesn't make us less human and less worthy of us being around our community and being out there and being seen. So I think when Divya was thinking about this show, she reached out to me and other people that she knew who are neurodivergent and asked if she could just chat with us. And we met on Zoom. It was me and a bunch of other people who were on the spectrum, and we just all shared our stories. So I think it's just a pleasant surprise that one of these acts in this show is going to be based on what I said. And I think that is such a gift. So I can't wait to see it.
Wonderful. So you shared a little bit about how neurodivergent in the autistic spectrum your child is. Could you share a little bit about the experience of initially learning it and the feelings that you went through?
Okay, so when he was born, he was not an easy baby. He was one of those kids who had acid reflux and just a lot of different issues, couldn't sleep well, and we were always in and out of the doctor's office. We were first-time parents, so we thought all babies were like this. And then I had my kids back to back, and when my daughter was born, I remember I had her on my lap and I was burping her, and I'm getting ready to catch all the baby puke, because with Aiden I would just have to catch it, and with her just a tiny little bit of spit up. I'm like, oh, you're an easy baby. And then that's when we kind of figured out, okay, maybe there's something different about my son. So then when he was about 6 months old, usually there's this website called babycenter.com, and now it's an app, but every week of your pregnancy, they send you an email that says, oh, your baby is this big this week, and it looks like a pumpkin, or it's as big as a raspberry or a strawberry. And after the baby's born, they send you weekly updates. And when he was 6 months old, I'm reading, hey, your baby's 6 months old. And then, by the way, did you know that doctors now have this research? They just came out with some research that you can actually diagnose autism at 6 months. Does your baby line things up? Does your baby spin things? And then, I kid you not, I put my computer or phone down, whatever I was looking at, and I looked down, and my son's on the ground, lined up some toys and was spinning them. So I freaked out, and I called the pediatrician and I said, look, I found out about this study and I want to see the pediatrician. And I came in, but he had not read that study, and he was still on the old school of thinking that you could only find out at 18 months. That was the soonest you could figure it out. So he's like, don't worry about it. If you're really concerned, call this thing called Help Me Grow. And Help Me Grow isn't just in Hennepin County. And you call that number and a nurse will come to your house and they'll evaluate your kid. And I lost the number and I never really actively thought to call. And I delayed getting any help for him maybe for another year because I was in denial. I think a lot of parents, we go through the stages of grief because when your child is born, you have all these dreams and hopes for them, and you never think that there could be something different about them or that they have to go on a different path. And when you have that in the back of your mind that that's something there, you just don't want to see it. So After a while, he just stopped eating properly. He would only drink. So we took him back to the doctor when he was probably about maybe a year old. And then the doctor said, you know what, he hasn't grown. And I really think he could be on the autism spectrum. So you really need to call this phone number and get some help for him. Then by that time we had moved to Hopkins. So I call the number and Hopkins School District comes over to the house. They interview me, they interview my husband. They play with baby Aiden, who would probably at this time is, I don't know, maybe 18 months at the time, almost 2. And then the diagnosis, the educational diagnosis for him came in 2 weeks shy of his 2nd birthday. I had to take him into the Hopkins Community Center where they sat him down and did this thing called an ADOS test. And part of it is kind of weird because, you know, there's no manual for parenting. Like, I never really played with him. So when they did the test, they sit him down. And she's like, oh, it's baby's birthday. They put up a baby doll. Then they had like this little piece of Play-Doh. And they put fake candles in there. Like, can you blow out the candles? And he's like, I don't know. You can see that he didn't want to play, didn't want to engage. And then after about an hour of all these tests and all these play-based tests, the lady looks at me. Her name was Linda. And she said, do you want me to tell you now, or do you want to wait for the letter to come in the mail? And I thought to myself, let's just rip off the Band-Aid and get it over with. So she's like, I am really sorry, but your son is moderately to majorly autistic. I cried because a lot of people who are adults on the spectrum would be upset that I was upset, but I think people just need to know that, like I said earlier, when you're a parent, you have all these hopes and dreams for your child, and when that's derailed like that, and you have this huge question of something that is unknown, you just feel alone and lost, and you don't know where to go from there. So I remember driving home, and my mom was visiting at the time. I dropped her off and I said, I'm going to the grocery store and getting everything gluten-free. And I didn't even tell her about it. I'm just like, he's fine, there's nothing wrong with him. And then just my husband and I knew, and then I told my mom maybe 2 or 3 weeks later. And she's like, you know, it'll be totally okay, don't worry about it. My dad was home in Calgary. And my mom called him and told him, and he was a little bit upset. He hung up the phone just to process the information and called back, and he's like, what can we do to help you go to these next steps? So then we felt a little bit lost. And then I think I was really sad about it. So I'm like, I'm lying down in bed, and my husband comes in, and my husband was born with something called Poland syndrome, which is where his right hand was a little bit webbed, and he was one of the first surgeries in India because he grew up there to separate the fingers of the hand. So, and then my mother-in-law was talking to him, and she said, where is she? And then my husband said, she's lying in bed. She's like, no, tell her to get out of bed, and I want to talk to her right now. So my husband brings me the phone, and she's like, it is not your fault. I know where you've come from. I know, like, and look at your husband, how amazing he is. He's a doctor. If you believe in your child, and you believe in yourself, and you give your kid the tools to succeed, then they will succeed. So just like pick yourself up, believe in everything good, and take those first steps forward. So then we thought, what would the first steps be? And I went online and I said, what do you do with the diagnosis? And the first thing that popped up on Google was Autism Speaks First 100 Days Kit. So I looked at the kit and it said it had different things about local charities for autism, local doctors that could help you, and different programs. So from there, we just did the regular Hopkins School District program where they came in 3 days a week. Then we moved to Edina, and before the age of 3, they come to your house twice a week. And then at 3, he started preschool, like a special education preschool. And by the time he was 4, 4.5, we needed more interventions. And we took him to Partners in Excellence for ABA therapy, which is now controversial because things change over the years. And now, after all those interventions, he went back to school, like a regular school in special education, and now he's going into high school. He still needs a little bit of help, but when you find a community and you have people that will be there to help you succeed and take those next steps forward, it can really help. So yeah, that was the long explanation.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
So it seems like you had the family support almost immediately,
Yeah.
which is not the case with a lot of people, right? And you also mentioned words like denial and felt like you were lost and all that. Was there that hesitation to talk to your friends and what the society at large?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, so with our friend group, we didn't tell anybody for a year because there is that stigma. And I just thought, like looking back, I'm like, I don't want people to know. And then there was one day we were at a barbecue at a friend's house and we were in the backyard. And then I'm sitting with my friends and Aiden's playing, Ava's playing with all the kids. And then I said to them, about a year ago, he was diagnosed with autism. And they said, we couldn't even tell. And they're like, why did you even mention it? And I said, because if he does anything, I don't want to be looked at as a bad parent. Like, am I parenting wrong? Is it my fault? So people know that there's this issue. Maybe they'll be a little more understanding. And then I remember my friend said, what can we do to help you? And I had printed out the Autism Speaks kit for your friends. It's like a 2-page little PDF file that you can print out and give to people. And they read it, and it's just basically be there to support them, still call them over for dinners, ask them what they need in the house to make their child being in your house more comfortable for them. How can you meet them halfway and support them? So, and all of them did that. They were amazing. And we were lucky, but there's other people who aren't as lucky as me. And I've seen that in not just the Indian community, but people of all backgrounds. Like one time, we called over an Irish Catholic family for dinner, and this was like maybe 3-4 years ago. And they came over, but they never came back. And it's only because Aiden was sitting at the table watching the iPad during dinner. They didn't like that. So people can be really funny. And then one time, we were invited to a friend's Diwali party, and it was huge, like 100, maybe 200 people in this giant house. I'm sitting on the couch with Aiden, and he just needs time to acclimate to different places. So he's just sitting with me. We're playing a game on the phone, and this other lady comes up to me, and she's like, you know what? I also have a son with special needs, and he, like your son, doesn't like big parties like this. I'm like, no, he likes being with people. He just needs a minute. And she said, well, I don't know if you saw my son earlier, but he was like walking around and he said hi to everybody. But then we took him home. And then she's looking at me, and then she's looking above my head. And then like I turn around like this, and the hostess was behind me looking at me. So I assume, I could be wrong, the hostess told this lady to tell me that story to get me to leave, because our mere presence was making them uncomfortable. But I did not leave because I believe that you need to stand up for your kids because you're their only advocate, and you need to make people realize that just because somebody is different and they need a little more time to sit there and they might not be talking or they might just be sitting in a corner doesn't mean they're not having fun. They just are acclimating in their own way. So we stayed for the rest of the event. We had dinner there. He played with the other kids, and then we went home. So yeah, it can be a bit of a challenge. And then the worst thing that ever happened was my husband's colleague, so Japanese American, married to, I think she's from Iowa or Idaho or something. They're both doctors. They used to come over to our house often. They had 3 little kids at the time. I think now they have 5. And I'm talking with the wife in my kitchen, playing with her baby. Everyone else is outside in the backyard and they're all grilling. And she says to me, you know what, it's so nice of you to call us over to your house every time. We love coming here. You're such the most gracious host. And then she says, we're not going to call you over to our house because we don't know how Aiden would do. And I'm like, what do you mean about that? And she's like, well, our house is smaller and then we don't want him to knock anything over. And I said, does he knock anything over here? And she says, no, I've never seen him do that. And then I said, you know what, here's your kid. I'll join you outside in a minute because I needed a minute because I was kind of mad. And then we fed them dinner. They left. And then I told my husband they are never allowed in my house ever again. Because if you make such a snap judgment and come to something in a place of fear and not with understanding, that to me is dangerous and a little bit off-putting. So, and if anyone is watching this video, I would say to treat people with compassion and understanding, and not to, if you're feeling uncomfortable with someone with a disability, visible or invisible, coming into your home, and you want to ask someone, how you can make that guest more comfortable. That's all you have to say. How can we make your child, or if you are the one with disability, with you, more comfortable in our home? What can we do to help you? That's the only thing you need to ask. So.
Thank you. So one of the things that I picked, so the good parenting and the bad parenting aspect that you mentioned slightly, right? And the comparison as well, where the autistic spectrum or the neurodivergent spectrum is pretty large, and each person is unique and each person might have separate needs. But you feel that there is a constant comparison, maybe in a way that people have advised for you, which might not be accurate, which might not actually apply to you, but everything is painted with a broad brush when it comes to autism.
So people think that there's like that television show, The Good Doctor, where he's just socially awkward, but he's gifted with medicine. They think that all autistics have that one unique talent, and that's called savant syndrome. And I think it's only in 3 to 5% of people with autism. And I want people to know that there's a saying in our community that if you know one person with autism, you only know one person with autism. Like, look at me. I am on the autism spectrum. I didn't even know till I was 37. And I found out when I was reading about the differences of how autism presents in women and in men, boys and girls. It's very different on the genders because females have a way of mimicking and masking where we can look at other people and copy what they're doing. And I never even realized I was doing that my whole life until I read that. And then another thing that differentiates the female versus the male presentation of autism is that you were probably bullied at school. The other thing was you easily made friends in elementary school, but as you got older, it was more difficult. It was difficult to go from one school to the next. And the big one was when you transfer into university, you had more of a difficult time living on your own, maybe struggled with feeding yourself, maybe struggled with any other forms of executive functioning like cleaning your dorm room or cleaning the dishes on a more like appropriate time schedule. So I remember getting the diagnosis at the Autism Society of Minnesota. I'm shocked. I'm sitting in my car looking at the design of my car on the steering wheel, and the first call I made was to my brother because I was the closest with him growing up, and he's got a stepson on the spectrum as well. And I called him and I'm like, hey, I'm standing outside Autism Society of Minnesota and they just gave me the diagnosis of autism. And then he's like, really? And he's like, you know what, it kind of sort of makes sense because you've never had tact. Like he used to always say, if I said something funny or weird, he'd be like, Feroza, here is a penny. Go enroll in the School of Tact. So it was funny that way. So he's like, yeah, that kind of makes sense. And then I drove home and I told my husband because he was home from work and he's like, oh my gosh, everything makes so much more sense now. So there's different things like that. And I remember asking the lady at Autism Society of Minnesota who gave me the diagnosis, but I am a TV journalist. Like I go out talking to people, taking information, and communication is basically my job. And the characteristic trait of autism is communication and talking to people. And she just said, you know what, that's a stereotype, but like, think about it. Your job is routine. You go to work in the morning, you get your story, you know the next steps for getting the story is calling the sources, you get your camera person to come out with you, you film the story, you come back, you write it, you edit it, you voice it, it goes to air, and then you're done with it for the day. And you know you're doing that day in, day out. So you are following a routine. So like little things like that. And to this day, I get people telling me, oh, you're not autistic. Everyone else is just a little autistic. It's a spectrum. And that's wrong because yes, it is a spectrum, but it can be a different combination of things. I always tell people it's not like a linear line like this, like severely autistic and like just a little bit. It's like, you know when you have like a color wheel and there's different little colors and you can move it and like maybe it's a little more green and then it's a little more green and yellow. Like I feel like the spectrum is like that. You can be, it's like a beautiful, broad rainbow of differences and infinite combinations. So I think that's what it is. That's why people say if you know one person with autism, you only know one person. So I hope that answers your question.
It does. So you spoke a little bit about how you got to know you got diagnosed in the spectrum as well. Has it changed how you look at neurodivergence or how you perceive your own child's neurodivergence before and after? How has it changed?
Oh, it changed a lot because, before that, I thought that he's different from me. There's a barrier between, and then now I'm looking at our commonalities and I'm looking at the way I parent him and just communicating with him. And I always think that now I'm not one of them, but now I think that I understand more because I share that diagnosis with him and I can try and find more commonalities between the two of us. Like, I used to go to restaurants and hear the cacophony of noise and struggle to really listen to people, but I would force myself to sit there and go through it and just endure. And then I remember going to a restaurant after that and doing that again, and I'm like, wait a minute, what if Aiden was doing this? How would he react? Like, I know that I can sit here and I can force myself to concentrate and look at the other person and hear them and tune out all the noise around me, because I've been doing that for years. But with him, I would have to teach him the steps of, like, focus on the person in front of you, try and block out all the noise. And then I thought, there must be something out there that can help him block out all the background noise. So then I looked up different earplugs that we could use, and there's one called Loops, where it's like a earplug that was designed for concerts, but if you wear them in a restaurant, it filters out the background noise so you can really hear people around you better. And I bought a pair for him and I bought a pair for me, and to this day when I go to really large restaurants, I pop them in my ears and it's easier for me. So then I thought, wow, I didn't think that I needed these little minor adjustments, but if I can get it for him, I am allowed to do that for me too. And now at the dentist, I told them my diagnosis, and I've always hated to go to the dentist. It's like such a sensory overload when you think about it, because you have to open your mouth, they're putting things in your mouth, and it's like, ooh, I still cringe. So then they're like, oh, you're on the autism spectrum, would you like a fidget toy? I'm like, sure. So then now I have this toy and I'm fidgeting, and then my mom laughs at me sometimes, thinking that's so funny because you can do it without those tools. But my question is, why should we have to? If it's so easy for me to get those accommodations for myself and ask about them for me, I can ask them for him. I can teach him to have a voice and ask for those things. Because any way we can make people's lives easier, we should really try to do that. Because if at the end of the day it doesn't affect you, but it would help them, we should make those adjustments.
So it has really helped you in understanding, acknowledging, and also feeling more empathetic towards.
Oh, definitely. More empathetic, trying to understand from where he's coming from and from where a lot of people are coming from with their day-to-day things. Like, one of my friends from the Autism Speaks walk, her name's Cammie. She has a son and a daughter on the spectrum. They're now in their 20s, but when we were working on the walk together, she came to one of our meetings. We used to meet once a month, and she said, my son said something to me that really made me think. And she said, he asked me, do I make you sad that I'm on the spectrum? And she said, no, I'm not sad because of your diagnosis. I'm not mad about it. But if you see me struggling with it, it's because it makes me sad that life might be a little bit harder for you, because you have to go through so many different hoops and hurdles just to have a regular life that other people wouldn't have to do. So that if you see me being sad or upset, it's not because of you, it's just about whatever you have to go through. And that made me sit and think for a minute that if we can change the world around us for anybody, not just if you're autistic, just for anyone who needs extra help. Like, for example, you're going to the grocery store, someone needs help getting something off the shelf, go help them. And then I did a story 2 or 3 years ago about a lady who was diagnosed with a terminal brain tumor. And she wrote the most beautiful book called There's Something Going On Upstairs. And I'm sitting with her across from the coffee shop, and she's so generously giving me an hour of her time when she knows her time is limited. And she said, go through life giving people love, grace, compassion, and empathy. So maybe you're at Target and you're parking your car and someone's left a cart in the one parking spot that's left and it makes you angry. But hey, maybe that person had to rush somewhere. Maybe they can't walk their cart back and the only place they can put it is the spot next to their car. So if you give others grace, understanding, compassion, love, and treat everyone with that sense of love and compassion, then we can really make the world a better place. And that story was such a gift. And I try and take what she said and have that joy in life and find that positive state and the positive way of thinking. And that has really changed my life.
I like what you said, love, grace, empathy, and compassion. So the friend that you mentioned, she was really understanding and she was feeling sad that you have to, life is a bit more hard compared to the others. But as a society at large, especially talking about the South Asian community, and also going back to what you shared about the Diwali experience, is there a lack of tolerance? Is there what is not convenient for me? I'm not going to indulge in it. Right? So that kind of an attitude, do you think it is a bit more in the South Asian community, or what are your feelings about it?
I just think it's a cultural thing. See, I grew up in Canada, so I have like a different little mix of things, but from talking with other people, especially about other issues like depression, anything like mental health, and it's not just autism, it's like anyone with a disability, mental health issues, we just don't talk about it. We sweep it under the rug because I feel with South Asians, we always want to present the best versions of ourselves, and anything imperfect is bad. What I've noticed, especially here in Minnesota, is while there are the rare families that are really accepting and awesome, there's also some people that, oh, you do not fit the mold. I don't want to have anything to do with you. I was doing a story about Asha USA, which they do a lot of help about mental health awareness and helping other people with those issues. And we were talking about their 5th anniversary. And I'm talking with the founders, and they said something very interesting about karma, that if you have a child with these issues or you yourself have any sort of issues, it's something that you did in a past life and you deserve it now. So there's obviously something wrong with you, so we're not going to talk to you anymore. So that's why you're not included. For some people think like that, not everybody. But I think that is always there too. So I just think, and it's not just South Asians, it's like a lot of different people, like even my neighbors. I remember, so I had really bad postpartum depression after my 2nd child was born, and then I lost my 3rd pregnancy to an ectopic pregnancy, and I hit a horrible depression that I could not get out of. And I remember going out with a bunch of friends from my community. So we're Parsi, so Indian, Zoroastrian. And we went out to Lord Fletcher's in Minnetonka, had a great lunch, and then our dinner, and we left in a parking lot. And then one of the ladies who's 20 years older to me just said, you can't be depressed, just snap out of it. Like it doesn't exist that way, you know? So there's always this mentality that you can sweep it under the rug or it's not really an issue and let's just not talk about it. I remember talking with my mother-in-law and father-in-law when they were visiting last time, because they lived in India until they were 50 before moving to New Jersey. They told me that in their colony there was one family that hid their daughter who had special needs. They never took them out. And it's not just a lot of people in that culture, they don't acknowledge that they have a child with these issues and they just don't take them out. And there was another family here in Minnesota who told me 20 years ago there was another family that did that with their other daughter and even a son. So Aiden's occupational therapist, when he was 4 or 5, she's white, grew up in Minnesota, and her little brother had Down syndrome. And in the 50s, when a child was born and they obviously had an issue or a disability, you were allowed to send your kid to a government home, and the baby would just come home on their birthday every year to be with the family, but then they go back to this facility. And then the occupational therapist at the time said, my mother would have none of it. So we took the baby home, raised him like our own. He went out wherever we went. And then, so it's like, she said it was 1956. They're in the grocery store and her brother has Down syndrome. And she's pushing him in the cart down the grocery store aisle. And 2 other ladies dressed prim and proper housewives are coming down the lane like this. And they say, can you believe they let him out? So I think that societies will eventually catch up, but if we as individuals acknowledge that humanity is like a mosaic, it's made up of different tiny pieces, and everyone is different in their own way. It can be different by race, by gender, sexual orientation, invisible and visible disabilities. But if we go beyond those labels and just see the person underneath, then our society will be better off.
What other things that the community can do or organizations like Saath can do in order to make it a better place?
Well, first of all, we need to talk about it more, and I'm so excited about this show because it will make people think about neurodivergence and even visible disabilities in a different way. And also, if we can have more accommodations like quiet rooms in all our get-togethers and events, and also not stare at people. Like, I remember when my son was younger, and if we went out anywhere and he had a meltdown or he was crying, if you're at a restaurant and a baby's crying, people would just go like this, how dare that child be crying, sort of thing, you know? So if we can be more understanding and actually sit down and talk to the parents, because another issue I had was I went to that same Diwali lady's house once, and it was just a regular dinner party, and this lady had a little baby, and then she was talking to me, and someone went up to her and said, by the way, our kid is autistic, stay away from her. Like, it's catching, like it's something that you're born with, it's not like a disease. I thought that was really misinformed. So I think if people talk about having neurodivergent kids, bring them out to parties, and then I think that the biggest thing would be to still include people. Like, our family hardly ever gets called to our community events or like even like house parties. So because I think we would just be, oh, it's too difficult to call you over. Like, we don't know what to do with you. But it's like, what do you mean what it is to do? Like, I'll bring my kid, he brings his iPad, he usually sits down for a minute, and then he'll go talk to other people. So yeah, if we can just look over those differences and not see them as inconveniences, but still be open to calling people over and calling them out, that would be great. And it won't be so lonely.
So let's talk about the show itself. Does your child know Aiden, right? Aiden, I'm assuming that he'll come and watch the show.
He won't.
He won't?
He does not like loud noises. So if you had a sensory friendly version of the show.
We will have a sensory friendly version of the show.
So you leave the house lights on?
Yes.
And then the volume will be really,
Volume
really,
will be
really
much
low?
lower. We will check with that.
You'll need a quiet room, and it's okay for people to walk around during the show?
Yeah, that sounds, yep,
Yeah?
totally.
Okay. I can try, but he hates clapping. That is something that really terrifies him, so that's why mainly he doesn't go to shows. So we can try, but I don't think he'll walk into the actual event. He'll be like, no, 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 no. Okay, fine. So we'll see. That's one of my pet peeves for my daughter. She does all these shows, and she wants her brother to come cheer her on, but he won't get beyond the lobby. So we try. So.
Understood. But I really hope with all the accommodations,
We can make it happen.
yeah.
We can try. Like I said, like, he can try and wear the loops. We have like, we've tried like noise canceling headphones. The ones that really work well are the shooting ones. Like, for if you're a gun owner, those are the best ones. And we found out from another friend of ours who Aiden met at Partners in Excellence ABA therapy about them. And we're like, what is he wearing? And they're like, oh, they're for shooting. I'm like, oh. So we went and bought a pair from like Cabela's or Gander Mountain, and it works really well.
Like, would any neurodivergent person who is seeing it, do you think that's more of an acceptance? Would they appreciate it? What do you think?
I don't know, it's always like a double-edged sword when people create shows with the best of intentions. Sometimes it can backfire. But I think what you've done is really amazing, that you've talked to people who are on the spectrum, gotten their points of view, and really understood the issue. So I really can't wait to see what is there on stage and how you interpret it. And I think that generally, from all the questions you've asked me, I think that you'll approach it at a very intriguing way. And if you can take all those elements and put them on stage in an artistic way, and I think you said it's all about dancing and body movement and music and not talking. And I think in that way it's unique, because some people on the spectrum are nonverbal, they don't talk. And just to see what you do with that on stage would be really interesting and moving. So I can't answer for my son, but I can answer for myself that I'm excited to see it. So
Nice.
Wonderful. Last question that I have, I can go on.
you can. I got all day. So.
Um, so you have gone through this journey of first with Aiden and then your own discovery of your own diagnosis, right? There are a lot of people who are going through that process right now. We in fact have some of them in the show. There is a recent diagnosis and they are battling that grief, also denial stage in different stages of coming to terms with what is going on. So with your learnings, with your history, what advice would you give?
I would say when you get the diagnosis, it seems like the world is over, that the life you knew changes. And I think the best thing that ever happened to us, we were at a Cracker Barrel restaurant on this road trip, and it was me, my mom and dad, I think my in-laws were there too, and we're eating dinner, and then we asked for the check. And they said, this couple that just left paid your bill for you. And on the back, they said they wanted to give this to your daughter. And it said, the Lord blesses children and families in the most unique of ways, and how lucky you are to have a boy like that in your life. So, and then my husband always thinks that we were chosen to be on this path. And I always think that if you believe in a higher power, I would say God, but if you don't, I would say life doesn't throw you what you can't handle. In the moment, yes, it's devastating. It's a change from what you thought. But in the end, you are strong enough, and your goal as a parent is to create a human adult who is a productive member of society. And your goal as a parent is to give your child love and to show them that life is joy. And when you look at Aiden especially, he's so happy. He loves everyone. He has this beauty of seeing a person's soul and their inner light, and he believes everyone is inherently good. And I believe that everyone is inherently good. And as we go through this life, we can get jaded. We can see differences and look at things that are bad. But if you see things in a positive light, it does get better. I also tell people that, especially with Sewa AIFW, they have this initiative called SUPNA, which is a mentorship program where South Asians who have kids that are a little bit older on the autism spectrum are partnered with other people who are just diagnosed. But the problem is they come to Sewa AIFW and then they say, but I don't want other people to know. Like, people want to hide it. They think that if my kid, this one's autistic, the other one's not, but will that person ever get married? So they don't want people to know. They want to hide it. And I'm telling you, it's okay to let other people know, because you may be surprised. Like, autism is what, 1 in 32 kids now, or 1 in 36? So in a room, let's say you go to a party with 100 Indian people in the room, there's gonna be like 2 or 3 who are walking this path with you and you just don't know it. So if we talk about it more, we celebrate these neurodiversities more, life will be so much better, I think.
Thank you.